It started like any other day for Officer Lisa Carter. She wore her badge with pride, believing she had the authority to keep the streets in check. But that authority had a dark side, one she often abused. Lisa had a habit of profiling people based on their race, making arrests without cause, and using her badge as a weapon rather than a shield. Her fellow officers knew it, but no one dared to challenge her. That is, until the day she made a mistake so big, it flipped her entire world upside down. That morning, Lisa spotted a black man stepping out of a sleek black sedan in front of a government building. He looked well-dressed, too well-dressed, in her opinion. Something about him made her suspicious. Maybe it was the confidence in his walk, or the way he didn't flinch under her sharp gaze. Without a second thought, she approached him. "Sir, I need to see some ID," she said, her hand already hovering over her holster. The man frowned but remained calm. "Is there a problem, officer?" Lisa didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back. Within seconds, she had him pinned against the car, ignoring his protests and the growing stares from bystanders. "You're under arrest for resisting an officer," she barked. Then, a voice cut through the tension. One of her fellow officers rushing toward her, eyes wide with shock. "Lisa, what are you doing?" "That's Chief Anderson." Her heart dropped. Chief Anderson, her boss. The man who had the power to end her career in an instant. And judging by the cold fury in his eyes, that's exactly what he was about to do. For a moment, everything froze. The weight of her mistake sank in like a punch to the gut. Lisa loosened her grip, stepping back in shock as Chief Anderson straightened his suit, brushing off the humiliation she had just put him through. Bystanders whispered, some recording the scene with their phones. Her fellow officers stood still, waiting to see what would happen next. Chief Anderson locked eyes with her, his expression unreadable. "Officer Carter," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Lisa opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had built her entire career on authority and control, and now, in a single moment, both had slipped through her fingers. She had arrested the man who sat at the top of the chain of command, the very person responsible for deciding who stayed on the force and who didn't. Her mind raced, searching for an excuse, something to explain why she had acted the way she did. But the truth was ugly. She had made an assumption, and that assumption was based on something she could never say out loud. The chief turned to the other officers. "Take her badge and gun, now." Lisa's heart pounded as her colleagues hesitated, unsure of what to do. One of them, Officer Reynolds, a rookie who had always admired her, finally stepped forward. His hands shook as he unhooked her badge. She wanted to protest, to fight back, but there was nothing she could say. Then, just as she thought things couldn't get worse, Chief Anderson looked at her and said, "Follow me." Without another word, he walked toward the station, leaving Lisa no choice but to follow. Lisa followed Chief Anderson into the station, her footsteps heavy, her mind spinning. Every officer they passed looked at her with a mix of confusion and judgment. Some whispered. Others avoided her gaze entirely. She had once commanded respect here, but now she felt like a ghost walking through a place that no longer belonged to her. The chief led her into his office and shut the door behind them. The silence in the room was suffocating. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed, studying her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Sit," he said, his voice cool but firm. Lisa obeyed, her fingers gripping the edges of the chair. She had been in this office before, but never like this. Chief Anderson exhaled sharply. "You really don't know who I am, do you?" Lisa swallowed hard. I made a mistake, sir." "A mistake?" He let out a humorless laugh. "Do you have any idea how many complaints I've received about you? How many people have accused you of exactly what happened today?" Lisa felt her face heat up. She had always brushed off those complaints, convinced they were just people trying to make trouble. But now sitting here, the power dynamic completely shifted. She realized she had nowhere to hide. "You saw a black man in a nice car, and you assumed he didn't belong. Anderson continued. That's not just a mistake, that's a pattern. Lisa opened her mouth to argue, to defend herself, but the words felt empty even before they left her lips. She had spent years convincing herself she was just doing her job, keeping the streets safe. But now she was the one under scrutiny. Then Anderson leaned forward, his voice low. You think I'm about to fire you, don't you? Lisa held her breath, unsure of what to say. I could, he continued, and maybe I should, but I have a different idea. Lisa frowned, confusion creeping into her fear. What do you mean? The chief studied her for a moment before speaking. You're about to learn what it feels like to be on the other side of that badge. Her stomach twisted. Whatever was coming next, it wasn't going to be good. Lisa's pulse pounded in her ears. Chief Anderson's words hung in the air, heavy and unreadable. She had expected anger, maybe a lecture, but this was something else. What do you mean? She asked, her voice quieter than she intended. The chief didn't answer right away. He walked over to a file cabinet, pulled out a thick folder, and dropped it on the desk between them. The pages inside were filled with reports, complaints against her, names, dates, statements. Some she recognized, others she had brushed off, convinced they wouldn't go anywhere. But now they were all here, staring back at her like ghosts from a past she had refused to acknowledge. You see, Officer Carter, Anderson said, his tone unreadable, I could fire you right now. And maybe that would be the easiest thing to do. But firing you won't teach you anything. It won't fix what you've done out there. Lisa's throat tightened. I was just doing my job. Were you? His stare was sharp. Or were you doing what you thought your job was? Lisa had no answer. She knew how this looked. But she wasn't a bad cop. She had spent years proving herself, climbing the ranks, earning respect. Hadn't she? Anderson sat down across from her, lacing his fingers together. You think you know the system because you've always been on this side of it. But you don't. You have no idea what it feels like to be treated the way you treat people. Lisa felt a knot in her stomach. What are you saying? He leaned in, lowering his voice. I'm saying I'm not firing you. He let the words sink in before adding, I'm sending you undercover. Lisa's breath caught. Undercover. That's right, Anderson said. You're going to experience what it feels like to be seen as less than, to be judged before you open your mouth, to walk into a place and feel the weight of suspicion on your shoulders for no reason at all. Lisa shook her head. That's crazy. What do you expect me to do? Anderson leaned back. You'll find out soon enough. Lisa opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, Anderson stood up, walked to the door and opened it. Report back here tomorrow morning, and don't come in uniform. She sat frozen for a moment before finally standing. As she stepped past him, he added one final sentence that sent chills down her spine. By the time this is over, Officer Carter, you might not recognize yourself. Lisa barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, Chief Anderson's words echoed in her mind. *B, the time this is over, you might not recognize yourself. The weight of those words unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She had spent her whole career enforcing the law, always in control. Now, she was being thrown into something completely unknown, something that felt dangerously close to punishment. The next morning, she dressed in plain clothes, jeans, a hoodie, sneakers. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. Without her uniform, without her badge, she felt exposed, vulnerable. Shaking the feeling off, she drove to the station, her stomach twisting with unease. When she walked into Chief Anderson's office, he wasn't alone. A man she had never seen before sat across from him, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. He looked her over, assessing her the way she had done to so many others. This is Devin Carter, Anderson said. He's going to be your guide. Lisa frowned. Guide for what? Devin smirked. For your new life. Anderson slid a file across the desk. Starting today, you're not Officer Lisa Carter. You're Lisa Johnson. No badge, no gun, no backup. You're just another civilian trying to get by. Lisa's heart pounded. And what exactly am I supposed to do? Anderson's expression darkened. You're going to live as the people you've targeted live. You're going to see the world through their eyes. And if you slip up, if you so much as hint that you're a cop. He let the silence stretch before finishing. Then you're on your own. Lisa swallowed hard. This wasn't just some lesson. This was a test, and something told her she wasn't ready for what was coming next. Devin stood, motioning for her to follow. Welcome to the real world, Lisa. Hope you can handle it. As they walked out of the office, Lisa had the uneasy feeling that whatever she thought she knew about justice, about power, about herself, was about to be shattered. Lisa followed Devin out of the station, her mind racing. She had spent years walking these streets with authority, but today, for the first time, she was just another person. No badge, no protection, just a name on a piece of paper and a world that no longer saw her as untouchable. The first few days were eye-opening in ways she hadn't expected. Devin took her through neighborhoods she had only ever patrolled, but this time she wasn't a cop. She was just Lisa, a woman trying to get by. She saw the looks of suspicion, the way store clerks watched her movements, the way doors locked as she passed. It didn't matter that she was the same person she had always been. Without the badge, she was just another face in a world that didn't trust her. But it wasn't until the fourth night that everything changed. Devin had brought her to a corner store to grab something quick. As she stepped outside, sirens wailed in the distance. 2 police cruisers sped down the street before screeching to a stop right in front of them. Lisa's stomach dropped. She recognized one of the officers stepping out, Officer Reynolds, the rookie who had taken her badge. "Hands where I can see them," he shouted. Lisa barely had time to react before a second officer grabbed her arm and shoved her against the wall. "Hey, what the hell?" Devin started, but he was cut off as another cop restrained him. Lisa's pulse pounded. "It's me," she blurted out, struggling against their grip. "Reynolds, it's Lisa." Reynolds hesitated, his grip loosening for half a second before confusion crossed his face. "Lisa who?" The words hit her like a slap. She realized in that moment that he didn't recognize her. Without her uniform, she was just another suspect. Another person in the wrong place at the wrong time. It didn't matter who she was. "She fits the description," the other officer muttered. Lisa's stomach twisted. Asterisk the description. Asterisk, she had said those same words before, countless times, and now they were being used against her. For the first time in her life, she felt true fear. Not just fear of making a mistake or losing control, but the fear of knowing that, right now, nothing she said would matter. Then, just as suddenly as it started, Chief Anderson's voice rang out, "Let her go." The officers immediately stepped back, confusion in their eyes. Lisa turned breathless as Anderson emerged from the shadows. He had been watching the whole time. Lisa's heart pounded as she stared at him, realization crashing down on her. This had been the real test. It was never just about seeing life from the other side, it was about feeling it. Asterisk living asterisk it. And she had failed, because when it happened to her, she had panicked, she had fought, she'd have felt powerless. Just like all the people she had arrested before. Anderson met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Now do you understand?" Lisa couldn't speak, because for the first time in her life, she truly did. Lisa stood frozen, her breath unsteady. The weight of everything that had just happened pressed down on her. She had spent years believing she understood the world, that her badge gave her the right to judge, to act without hesitation. But now, stripped of that power, she had felt what it was like to be on the other side, to be powerless, unheard, and completely at the mercy of someone else's assumptions. The officers, still confused, stepped back, their gazes shifting between her and Chief Anderson. Devin brushed off his jacket, giving Lisa a knowing look before shaking his head. "Now you get it, don't you?" Lisa couldn't answer, because the truth was she didn't know how to. Chief Anderson sighed, stepping closer. This was never about punishing you, Lisa. It was about opening your eyes. You weren't born this way, you were taught. And if you can be taught to see people as threats, you can be taught to see them as human too. Lisa swallowed hard, guilt twisting in her chest. She had spent so much time believing she was right, that she had never stopped to question if she was fair, if she was just. And now she knew the answer. Anderson studied her, waiting. "So, what happens now?" he'd asked. Lisa took a deep breath. She wasn't the same person who had walked into his office days ago. She had seen too much, felt too much. And for the first time in her career, she didn't have all the answers. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I want to learn." Anderson nodded, a small hint of approval in his eyes. "Then maybe there's hope for you yet." As Lisa walked away, she knew one thing for sure: this was only the beginning.